Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans. I am your one co-host, Anneke Van Rossum, using pronouns she, her, joined by my other co-host,
Maya Van Rossum, also using pronouns she, her.
This is a podcast where we talk about important social and environmental justice issues through a generational lens. And I'm going to apologize for the sound of my voice. I am just slowly losing my voice this week for no reason at all. But yeah, so it's been super hot. And if you're living anywhere, literally anywhere in the world, there is a massive heat wave. And that is what we are going to be talking about on today's episode.
And I thought, it was interesting, right, Anneke? You and I had a bunch of other ideas for this week's show, but it seems like we had to speak about the heat because everybody's experiencing it, right? And so we're going to try to find a way to talk about it a little bit differently than perhaps you're hearing on the news. We're not going to be talking about the death and mayhem it is wreaking, although it is wreaking that on many communities, with literally people dying, people not being able to grow food, people suffering heat stroke. Even, I don't know if you saw, Anneke, on the news that there was a postal worker. I don't think they worked for the post office. I think they worked for a package delivery something.
Yeah.
And they nearly passed out in front of somebody's house due to heat stroke, which was quite surprising.
Yeah, I saw that. It was pretty alarming to watch.
So we thought that maybe, we would talk a little bit about the things that people need to be mindful of in this time of heat, but also things that people can do to keep themselves cool, because once this heat wave passes, there's going to be another one and another one and another one. So things that people can do near term and long term seem like a really good, helpful focus for this week's podcast. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely, I feel like we have to, before we get into the solutions and things, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is that we are facing a massive heat wave because of climate change, and there's no whatever weird way people want to explain that it's happening for another reason. That's just not it.
I was actually wondering just yesterday, all those climate change deniers, those politicians, those people in positions of power who had the ability and have had the ability and still have the ability to do something about the climate crisis, to help us avert the worst of climate catastrophe. Because while a lot of the adverse impacts are locked in, there is also a lot that can be avoided if we start making some meaningful choices that will really reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over the next 10 years. And I was wondering what those politicians must be thinking to themselves as they too are experiencing this heat wave. Their families, their friends, their communities are experiencing this heat wave. I don't have an answer, but it was striking me, do they feel any remorse, any guilt, any responsibility for this?
Probably not.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, probably not. It's not they're not going to think that it's their fault.
Well, so what are the things you said, acknowledging the elephant in the room? So we've acknowledged the climate crisis and that there are things that people can do about it. I think it is also important to acknowledge how this isn't just people being hot. In fact, these days, according to statistics, extremely hot weather kills about 700 people in the United States every year. At least that's the figure I saw. Perhaps you saw a different figure, Anneke, but it's way up there. And it's more than the other natural disasters that we experience in our nation. So heat has extreme impacts on all aspects of our community.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I was reading in a CNN article, they described not just the heat wave, but it was kind of it's just an alarming description of it. It goes, in the US, a strong dome of high pressure has set up over the southern plains and Mississippi Valley. Instead of heat being funneled in from the south, it is building unabated as the sun bakes down through cloudless skies. And then it says the connecting tissue between these heat waves is the influence of greenhouse gas emissions, and the planet's ever-warming baseline temperature. So I don't know, just like the dome description
Mhm.
is like very creepy and very, I don't know, it's very scary.
And you might remember last year, the scientific research was sort of showing how the extreme temperatures that are being experienced are perpetuating more extreme temperatures, right? There's like this cyclical effect. And the high temperatures are creating higher temperatures are creating higher temperatures because of the effect on the environment, which is really what's happening with the climate crisis, right? As overall temperatures rise, then we're having ramifications like melting the ice, which is releasing more carbon dioxide, which is making the climate crisis work. And there are these cyclical effects where actually, as we put in place harms on the environment, on the climate, we are actually forcing the environment and the climate to contribute to growing harms, right? And so it becomes this really devastating cycle. And yet it all begins with people and the choices that we're making.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I know. And I was watching just like some clips about Joe Manchin too, and how everybody's like pretty sick of him, and how he's like single-handedly like thwarted one of the most major like climate bills. And like I'm sure he feels like no remorse, even though people are like dying because of that.
I don't even know what to do with that man. I mean, I think the only thing that we have to really recognize is he has earned literally a fortune off of the fossil fuel industry. And so it is in his own selfish, greedy, personal interests to not have climate change be addressed in the way many in leadership would like to address it, which is advance clean and renewable energy and reduce dirty fossil fuels. Because going down that path, while it literally saves the world, it means that Joe Manchin will make less money. And that's really pretty despicable.
Yeah, I was watching a video too from CNN that was like, here's what Republicans and Democrats have to say about Joe Manchin. And at the end, it had like some of his funding. So from 2007 to 2022, so for 5 years, he's received $923,377 in campaign donations from the oil and gas industry. And then he also has like his own personal holdings in a coal company that's about like between 1 and 5 million is like his stake in that company. It's Energy Systems Inc. So I don't know.
And I mean, he's the biggest bad actor right now on the federal level, at least in terms of the person who literally has the power to allow things to advance or not, right? There are a lot of bad actors that are doing bad things, but on this particular issue, if he were to vote yes, it would be transformational in terms of change. And yet with a single word, no, he is, allowing us to continue to lock in a growing climate catastrophe. But we see, versions of this all across our nation at the state level, right? We see so many times when a good piece of legislation was put forth, and then a single person in a position of power at the committee level in a state legislature decides not to put that good piece of legislation up for a hearing. And because it doesn't get a hearing, it can't go through the process and it gets stymied and stuck. And it literally comes down to the decision of one person. And that is what's so abhorrent, because we're supposed to be living in a democracy where really the power does ultimately lie with the people, and that our legislators are supposed to be serving the goals and the needs and the priorities of the people as a collective. And yet to see time and time again how just a single person, right? And right now at the federal level, that single person is Joe Manchin, is able to thwart the goals of our entire nation. In the Supreme Court, it's more than one, right? It's sometimes 5, sometimes 6 of them, but just a handful of people able to thwart what people in our nation want in terms of social and environmental justice and environmental protection and climate justice. It really does start to boggle the mind and demonstrate that we really need to have some major change in this country. And of course, you know that I believe part of that major change is the passage of constitutional green amendments, but that alone is not going to solve the problem. There are a number of big ticket solutions like that that are necessary, And they have to ultimately remove the power from the ability of one person to cause the problem.
Well, I think it would be good if you explain like maybe a little bit, even though I know you're like the Green Amendment, like what would be some like key examples you think that people could like look to, especially with like, I don't know, like people are dying and people are having to also live every day being concerned about their elderly family members, their family members who are out in the sun all day. I mean, Dave and Vim and our family members are out in the sun cleaning people's pools all day, and it's like pretty scary actually.
So what the Green Amendment would do, first off, it would mandate that the climate be part of every decision-making process where there is a decision that could help or harm the climate crisis, because it raises up the climate protection, environmental protection, the rights of future generations to a clean, safe, and healthy environment, including a climate, to that highest constitutional level, giving it Bill of Rights recognition and protection. And so now suddenly, while today under current law, so often the government can evade considering the climate impacts of the decisions that they're about to advance, or minimize them, or dilute them. That no longer is possible. And when government officials start to do that, people do have the ability to hold them accountable in the courts through the justice system. And an example of how that might play out. Well, if there's a new fossil fuel proposal, a new natural gas fracking operation, and government is going to permit it, ensuring that climate is taken into consideration, along with environmental justice and the ramifications for future generations. If there is going to be a law that is passed, or if a law is passed by the legislature, like we actually had here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where it would literally mandate that fracking operations be allowed to advance in very significant ways, stripping from local authorities their ability to limit how, when, where these fracking operations are allowed to take place, removing environmental protection standards from fracking operations that apply to every other industry. That kind of wholesale legislation that has the potential to exponentially advance the fossil fuel industry, that now becomes something that is constitutionally suspect and that people can challenge. And actually in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we did challenge a law like that, a law called Act 13, using Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, and those provisions that would allow for that exponential expansion, actually cause that exponential expansion, were stripped out of the law as being unconstitutional. So, you know, when you have bad laws being passed, when you have bad permits being advanced, when you have big decisions that are going to have big ramifications for the climate, now suddenly the climate has to be considered. And if it is ignored by our government officials, there is a next step that people can take. They can use the Constitution to try to remedy that problem. But we only have Green Amendments in 3 states. So, and we're still at the early stages of figuring out how to make it work to greatest effect, including in the climate context. But the more Green Amendments we get passed, the more experience we're going to have, and the stronger Green Amendments protections are going to become with every single decision that advances. So it's a little bit of a longer term solution, but it's a powerful solution. And in some states like New Mexico, a constitutional Green Amendment could be put in place within a 12-month period. So sometimes it can happen pretty quickly. And once we get constitutional environmental rights, including the right to a stable climate, then we lock it into the governing process in some really meaningful ways.
Very cool. Very cool. So I think that's awesome and that's great. Yeah, so I guess though we can also switch to what people can be doing right now also to help beat the heat, since there's a lot of, yeah, I don't know, it's just, I can't talk.
Oh, Anneka's losing her voice for a second there. So I'm just going to step right in and say, you know, one of the things that people can do and need to be doing is looking out for problems, right? You know, we talked about the package delivery person who, they didn't pass out, but they clearly, you know, were forced to sit down, lay down because the heat was really getting to them. And so understanding when you or a family member or a pet or neighbor is at risk is really important. And if you go on to the website, there's a website, ready.gov. They really have a lot of really good information. And they talk about heat stroke, heat cramps, and heat exhaustion. And if you have heat stroke, it means the signs of heat stroke are an extremely high body temperature, above 103 degrees, red, hot, and dry skin with no sweat, a rapid, strong pulse, dizziness, confusion, unconsciousness. If somebody is experiencing this or you're experiencing this, you got to get to a hospital. You have to get medical attention, and you have to start to cool that person down in whatever way you can immediately. Heat cramps, the signs of heat cramps are muscle pains or spasms in the stomach, arms, or legs. And heat exhaustion is heavy sweating, paleness, muscle cramps, tiredness, weakness, fast or weak pulse, dizziness, headache, fainting, nausea, vomiting. And they say on ready.gov, if you have signs of heat cramps or heat exhaustion, then you need to find a way to start to cool yourself down. Take off excess clothing, get some sips of cool water or a sports drink. And if the symptoms, are worrying you, call your doctor, call a medical professional. Get yourself some good medical advice. So that is but the heat stroke, get to the hospital. The heat cramps or heat exhaustion, get medical advice and start to cool yourself down, is what this ready.gov seems to recommend.
Yeah, I was looking at some solutions too, and one, a lot of the big cities for people too, they're opening up like cooling centers. So it's just like a designated building that you can go to and sit in. During the day, they have like air conditioning going on. I know a bunch of places, and I think Philadelphia is doing it too. Are like well, I guess the best example is Boston has 50 splash pads at parks and playgrounds. So just like where there's free water for the kids to go play and you to go sit in, even if you're an adult, that's fine. But I know one of the biggest things too, when I used to work at Philadelphia Zoo, that we would always tell the interns was, and it applies now too, was that you have to stay hydrated. But a big thing is drinking like freezing cold water is actually not going to hydrate you. Your body has to expend energy to heat up the water anyways. So it's like technically a way to lose weight, sort of, kind of, but it's not good for hydrating. You want like room temperature water. I mean, if it's coming out cold, fine, but don't think purposefully like making your water cold is going to hydrate you more. It's going to hydrate you less.
And the other thing that I was reading about was that just plain old water can do it. Now, some people may be interested in sports drinks, or you might be, feeling unwell. And so you might want to have sports drinks as well, right? With the additional, electrolytes and things that they have, but also just sipping water throughout the day. So you're constantly sipping that water. Is really important to keep you hydrated. You can go with the water, maybe add some sports drinks in for the additional electrolytes and balance that gives. But don't think that you need to also be swallowing down, drinking down all of those sports drinks that frankly can be quite costly.
Yeah, agreed. It's also simple too. If you want, like, go hop in a cold shower. If you have like rags on your house that you can put cold water on, and you can put them on your wrists or the back of your neck. And also cotton sheets are like highly recommended to sleep in because they're very breathable. But don't refrigerate, or the weird one I thought was, don't refrigerate or freeze blankets or clothing. Says the amount of energy they can absorb from your body that night, they will be warm in just a matter of minutes, and then you have damp stuff that would mold your mattresses. I've never thought to do that, but don't do that if you're thinking of doing that.
One of the things you reminded me of was when I was young and we were in Spain. We actually lived in Spain one summer, and we went to, I think it was the Alhambra. And at the Alhambra, it's like a palace in Spain, and they had these fountains of water coming out of the wall, and the water was very cold, and and it was a very hot day. And what the gentleman at the Alhambra told us to do was put our wrists and the inside of our elbows under the spouting water, because that's where your blood is closest to the surface. And so you're sort of cooling down the blood and cooling down your body. Now, okay, we don't have Alhambras all over the place, but if you're going to like some of those cool spots that Anneke talked about where there's flowing water, maybe running that water a little bit on your wrist or your elbow, or those cool claws that Anneke talked about, putting it on your wrist, on your elbow, as well as behind your neck. But, cooling down that blood, at least that's what the gentleman at the Alhambra said. And it seemed to work. Nicely. The other idea that I read about, which is very environmentally mindful too, was if you want to create a little bit of an ice pack for yourself, right, to wrap and then help cool yourself down, you can take one of those reusable stacker bags, those silicone bags, put some ice or a little bit of water in there and freeze it. But you don't have to have a bag like that, right? If you have a plastic baggie, you can just reuse it and just make some ice packs. And then when the ice melts down, refreeze it. And then you can have sort of that cooling element, maybe to put in a tea towel that you put on your wrist, on your elbow, on the back of your neck, maybe over your forehead, just to help cool yourself down. Seems like a wise idea. I'm not a doctor, so just to make clear, it just seems sort of a common sense thing, and are amongst the kinds of things that I was reading about online.
And also, I think a big thing that people, as much as your doggies may want to go for a walk, especially if they're older, I would really advise, this is just a personal, not a pet expert, advise against taking them on any long walks. Just let them out in the yard, let them hang out, keep an eye on them. But it's super hot and dogs can get easily overheated, and even a short walk on a day like this can cause your dog to go into a heat stroke and then go to the emergency room. So I would caution against taking them outside.
Yeah, and remember, they're walking on that bare ground, and that ground, the sidewalk, the pavement is getting really hot. So they also have that additional, they don't have the protection of shoes between them and the ground. And so that's another thing that, they're just getting that direct heat contact, which can be hurtful in and of itself, but also contributing to the heat. And so I think you're very smart, Anneke, to mention that about being mindful about our pets.
Yeah.
The other thing is also slow down, right? Like, I know life is very fast and very busy, and everybody, we're always up and on the go, but it's okay. Even when you're inside in the cool spaces, just slow down. Get up and get down a little bit more slowly. Be a little bit more mindful about how quickly you feel you need to do things, but particularly if you go outside, take your time. Don't work too hard. Don't overstress yourself, whether you're working, for a paycheck, or whether you're just out there living life. Just try to take it a little bit easy and try to go in the shade, find that spot of shade. Now, of course, it can be harder when you're in the city. And it is one reason why when the heat wave passes, think about ways to help plant some trees in your community, whether it's that you get a tree yourself that you plant to help provide shade for yourself and others down the line, or whether it's that you work with your municipality or your school to find a program where they'll donate some trees and you can plant them around the community. When times like this hit and it gets hot, having those trees in those urban and suburban areas is really important for our health, for our safety, but also, frankly, for our quality of our lives, right? For the beauty of our communities. So it provides a lot of benefits, but particularly provides benefits right now. It's hot. I'm not saying run out now and go plant some trees.
Definitely not.
But when the heat wave has passed, think about what you can do to help get some of those trees planted. one of the things that I did want to mention, so there, like a lot of the solutions, air conditioning does take a lot of energy. And for most people, that energy is provided by fossil fuels. And so actually heating and cooling is a very significant part of the energy budget in our nation and around our world. And because we are not yet dependent on clean and renewable energy options, we are dependent on fossil fuels. That energy use does become, frankly, it ends up becoming part of the climate problem, because we're creating energy using sources like fossil fuels that are contributing greenhouse gas emissions. And so one of the things for those, there are sort of two ways to be mindful of that. One is, you mentioned it earlier, Anneke, try to conserve energy. Don't turn your air conditioning up so high that it's freezing cold in your house. Make it safe and comfortable, but don't make it freezing cold where you suddenly have to start walking around with a sweatshirt and sweatpants, because that means that you're using more energy. Try to, as you said, Anneke, try to, fill up those spaces around your windows and around your doors, so you're not losing the coolness that you might be creating if you do have the benefit of air conditioning in your home. And if you can't find like official things to put around, use some clothing to fill the spaces up. If you are in a situation where you're starting to think about getting a new heating or cooling system for your home, really start to think about investing in a heat pump versus sort of the more traditional HVAC system that people get. The heat pumps are much more efficient. I won't go into how they work because I don't really understand it, but they are much more efficient. So if you're in a position in your life where you're looking to replace that technology, look into heat pumps. It's beneficial for your heating and your cooling. I actually have it in my house. And if you can afford geothermal, we have that in our house. That makes your heat pump and everything even more energy efficient. But all of that also, I want to say, right, we don't all have the luxury of gobs of money sitting around. I certainly don't have that to go spending on all of these things. And yet these are important investments in for the health and safety of our lives and our communities and literally our world. And so there is a program, and I want to read it. It's called Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. Again, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. And this was that website that I had mentioned, ready.gov. Just talks about that as being a place to go if you can't afford your cooling costs or weatherization or other energy related home repairs. Low income home energy assistance program might be a place where you can get some financial assistance to help you. And if you can be more efficient in how you use your energy, not only is it good for the climate and protective of yourself, but it actually long-term can reduce your energy bill, right? Your electric bill and your power bill. And so it all the way around, you end up start saving money in your life, which is a good thing.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I just go.
Nope, you go.
I don't have anything.
Okay, I just had one other thing that I wanted to offer. A lot of people this time of year, if you are a person that likes to go to the local coffee shop, this time of year, people start thinking about iced coffee. And while hot coffee cups, are plastic lined and you shouldn't be using them, you should be using your reusable coffee cup. Iced coffee tends to really come in plastic cups, lots of plastic, and a plastic straw and a plastic lid and plastic. So, if you are going to go get a nice coffee as a way to cool yourself down with a yummy coffee, as opposed to a hot coffee, please, please, please bring your reusable cup. Plastic, as we've talked about on this show, is made from fossil fuels. So not only is it a waste product that very often goes into the environment, it doesn't end up getting recycled. Only like 8% of plastic gets recycled. Most of it ends up back out there in the world, wreaking havoc on the oceans, on our rivers, on our forests, on our wildlife. But on the manufacturing end, it is a major reason why we have more and more fossil fuel natural gas extraction, because it is a key ingredient in the manufacture of plastics. So it's a big part of the climate crisis problem. So just bring your reusable cup. And if the coffee shop is unwilling to use your reusable cup, then just say, well, thank you very much. I'm going to take my business elsewhere. And maybe if they hear that from enough people, they'll start to come around and start accepting reusable cups. You can wait an extra hour or day to get your yummy, cool coffee.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that.
No, I think that's good. I don't think a lot of people think about that, especially since post-COVID, and it's been like more difficult to bring like reusable cups into anywhere. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that was really it. I think, we certainly didn't cover everything. There are lots of great ideas out there. So think about it, share it. If you have a cool way that you kept yourself cool, take a picture and what is it, Anneke? Instagram us or whatever it is they do on that social media thing.
Tag us on Instagram at Green Jeans Pod.
Cool.
But yeah, so stay cool, stay safe, check in on your loved ones. Yeah, and I guess that's it. Until next time.